Men are good, as are you. Indeed, men are good, as are you, and as is my partner Janice Fiamingo, who's just one of my favorite men's advocates in so many ways. And today, Janice and I are going to talk about something important: male friendships. Male friendships, it's just a critical thing to talk about in this day and age. We both ran into this article. It's called Most Men Don't Have Real Friends But Need Them, by a guy named John Stonestreet in a website called Breakpoint, which I think is a Christian website. But it was a really fascinating article that I thought was a fair article about male friendships, and it had some good points about things, and I think they left out some things that we'll be talking about some today. But in the very beginning of this article, he points to this photo essay on another part of the web about male friendships, and we wanted to show you some of the pictures from that photo essay, basically, of male friendships. And, Janice, feel free to comment as we go along. But you can see that the men here are very close, holding hands, draping themselves over each other, sitting in each other's laps. I mean, just a very different kind of photograph than you'd see in today's world. There they are. And apparently, of course, wartime is when men get very close. And you can see here, and moved up, I guess this is probably World War II. And then, in today's world, guys still are able to touch each other. But it seems very different from those early pictures we saw. Don't you think, Janice?
Yeah, I mean, they are quite striking. And before drawing any conclusions, I would have to say that I'm not quite sure whether what we see in the photographs is necessarily a straightforward one-to-one representation of what men were doing in reality. I was thinking, well, if you compared 19th century photographs to late 20th century and 21st century photographs, you would say people were much more solemn. In the early 19th century, you have all those unsmiling photographs. And of course, now you have photographs where nearly everyone is always smiling. And you might think that would mean that everyone was much happier as we moved forward through time. And so I think there might be conventions at work, conventions of how
Yes,
one
yes.
presented one's body to the camera. It's hard to say for sure, but certainly it is true that the photographs suggest a degree of physical intimacy between men that might well suggest a greater degree of emotional intimacy, and at least general closeness and willingness to be very close
Yes,
that
yes.
that may not be as common today. Although I was also thinking about guys in sports teams.
Right?
If you took pictures of those guys, even if you simply watch a football game, as I was doing last night, there's a lot of casual, friendly touching
Yes,
amongst men. I don't
yes.
think male touch has completely died out
It has
by
not
any
disappeared.
means.
But the thing that
Yeah,
has changed is the lap sitting and the hand holding. You know,
that certainly.
if you see two
Yeah.
men holding hands today, you automatically think they're probably gay, right?
Yeah,
And
and so that's the point I think that the authors of this article are making. That when we look back at those photographs, we may be struck by what seems a different manner of male physicality, and they regret that for heterosexual men, some level of that touch and intimacy seems to be gone.
indeed. So let's look at a couple of quotes from that article just to give people a sense of what they were talking about. And here's the first one. Americans are lonely. According to research from Harvard Graduate School of Education, 36% of Americans report feeling serious loneliness, as do an incredible 61% of young adults. According to a Cigna Health survey, nearly 54% of Americans adults agree with the statement, "Nobody knows me well." Isolated and glued to our screens, it's a crisis that's only getting worse.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so
So,
That's pretty interesting,
Yes,
and the authors of this article are especially interested in the male piece of that, and especially seeing a link between that general loneliness and what they interpret as a decline in male friendship. And I think that's the next slide there about the decline in male friendship. So maybe we can
yes.
move to that.
Go
And
right
so they're
ahead.
saying that in general, and part of this is has to do with the pandemic, and it has to do with the use of Zoom meetings instead of in-person meetings, and
Right,
all of our social distancing and
right.
restrictions about gathering, and everything else. But according to the authors of the article, this is something that even predates all of those restrictions. And so they say that the most significant decline in friendship is among men. According to a May 2021 poll, the percentage of men who say they have no close friends has quintupled since 1990. So this is a shift that's taking place over the decades, affecting nearly 1 out of every 6 American males. So, yeah, if true, and I do think that something is happening to men in our culture that has probably accelerated since 1990. What we are seeing is increasing male isolation, and many men feeling cut off from
Yes,
other men and from their society in general.
yes, indeed, indeed. And both of these surveys, I think, are telling a story. And I think the story may very well be true, but the details of the story are a little bit suspect. I mean, both of these used, one used MTurk and the other used, what's it called? Another pay for service where you pay people to take surveys. So I'm a little suspect of those myself because anytime you pay someone to take a survey, which I think ends up being like 97 cents an hour, I think that's going to bias your sample of people you're looking at. So anyway,
Yeah.
but I think the
Especially
general
if you're
trends. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, especially if what you want to survey is people who are a bit lonely and aren't spending a lot of time with their friends, then the
Yes.
people who are willing to be paid to take surveys online are likely to be overrepresented in the category
Right.
of the relatively lonely and friendless, perhaps. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I do think that the article kind of already had in mind the conclusion it wanted to draw.
Yes.
So it's sort of shaping all of the evidence that it found in order to come to that conclusion. And I'm like you, I do think there's something to be said about
Yes.
male
Yes.
friendship and men in trouble. And it's definitely something worth investigating from the point of view that this article adopts, which is that male friendship is precious, as they say in the conclusion.
Yes.
It is something to be valued. It's important for men. It should be celebrated in our culture. It is astounding. They don't make this point, but like I was just thinking about it, it's astounding how little it is celebrated now.
Right.
And how little it seems to be a topic of discussion. If women were complaining about no longer having opportunities to form female friendships, that would be a national conversation. And it is sort of generally agreed that female friendship is really important for women, and it's celebrated and it's viewed positively, where you almost never hear positive discussions about male friendship. So I really value the article, though I didn't necessarily agree with its conclusions, but
Right.
I value the article for raising the subject and for making that statement that male friendship is precious.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And it's not seen as precious in today's culture. I think it's a great point on your part. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we'll be talking about, I think, as we go along. But let's look
Yeah.
at their conclusions.
Yeah.
They say, and yet behind those factors is one few people are willing to talk about the power of ideas, namely ideas about sex. We've created a culture so obsessed with disordered erotic love that we've all but thrown away the concept of friendship as a vital component of life. This is especially true for men. Yeah. Well, I
And
think
I think they're right in the
I
sense. I
think
don't
they are
know that
too.
it. Yeah, I don't know that it is necessarily about the. I mean, their whole argument is that we are now a culture obsessed with sex, and to a certain extent, I think they're right,
Right.
and that both women's and men's bodies have been sexualized. They talk about pornography. They talk about the emphasis on talking with children about whether they might be actually the opposite sex, or whether they might be, if they exhibit sort of non-gender stereotypical traits, they may actually be gay. All that emphasis, they feel that that is part of, or a big part of, what has inhibited male intimacy. I'm not absolutely sure that that is true, but I do agree that we should talk more about the value of male friendship. It's kind of interesting to me that the what they identify as the sexualization of everything has not, it seems, contributed to a decline in female friendship. So so
And
I'm not
why would
sure,
that be,
you
Janice?
know and so it seems to me, yeah, that there's so many other things going on in the culture
Yes,
that
yes.
are more important. Maybe they don't think of them, or they just even perhaps couldn't bring themselves to say that a completely gynocentric and feminist culture that devalues men and devalues male friendships may have a much larger impact on how men relate to one another than
Bingo.
this aspect of sexualization that they talk about.
Bingo. Well said. A culture that devalues men, you would assume it's going to also devalue male friendship,
Of course,
you
of
know?
course. I
Yeah.
mean, it really, like, it is so astounding. And that's why I appreciated this article for raising this, because I was thinking, like, why would men reach out to other men, either through, friendly physical touch, or just in general to be with other men, when what we hear relentlessly in the culture is that when men get together, bad things happen.
Exactly.
Men in groups, or even men in pairs, are said to engage in locker room talk. We've all read about that ad nauseum. They're said to objectify women. They're said to become predatory towards women in their behavior. Like, there's nothing good, almost nothing good at all, that is said in mainstream culture about what happens between men when they are together. So,
Yes.
if you were a man who can't help but absorb some of those messages from the culture, you have been told since you were a very young boy that your primary focus should be on helping girls.
Yep.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
For being a man.
You should apologize. You should take a step back. You should do everything possible to promote and support women or girls.
Yes.
And why would you want to have anything to do with other males?
And the future's female.
Exactly. The future is female.
God bless America. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
How is a boy who's told the future is female going to look at male friendships? I mean, he's thinking, no, I don't want to be a guy. And these
Yeah.
little boys are just thrown into this chaos where they think, well, do I want to be a man? No, I want to be a woman. I want to be
Mhm.
someone who's liked. Because they
Yeah.
see all these typical masculine behaviors, wonderful, beautiful masculine behaviors that are
Mhm.
shamed and called toxic.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, the more you think about it, it is just so astounding and disgusting that everything that has been a part of male friendship in the past, like competitiveness, whether in sports or in work-related activity, collaborating with men to build things, competing for status,
Yes.
being aggressive in the way
Yes.
you play together or in the types of things you do together, all of that has been ruled dangerous and unhealthy and disordered.
Yes. It's
So,
it's insane.
yeah, I mean, the only time that there is discussion of male friendship in mainstream culture is to tell men that they should be more feminine. They should relate to others in the way that women do. The negative aspects of the way women relate, of course, are almost never discussed. The fact that a lot of women's friendships are based on gossiping and complaining, and it can be fun, I must admit, as a woman, but that isn't something that I think most men are very interested in. They don't
No.
tend to bond over complaining about their lives as women
No.
do, or gossiping about others. So, it, like the, and these things seem to me so much more profound and damaging when it comes
Yes.
to male friendships than then that aspect of the sexualization. I mean, I do think that's true, but I mean, we've come through that now, and we're at a point where, as far as I understand, I mean, I don't mean to be arrogant in pronouncing on male psychology, but I think, most men are not sexually attracted to other men. Of course, some men are,
Right.
and that's
Right.
now, pretty much
Yes.
accepted in our
Yes.
culture,
Yes.
even celebrated. And and most men who are heterosexual, they say I'm not gay. That
Right.
once
Right.
that's clarified, I don't think that's an issue. I think that the
I agree.
constant demonization and pathologization of maleness itself is a
Yes.
much more serious problem.
Absolutely. And there's another piece of this too that's important, and that is, where do men bond? Where do men find their friendships? And men find their friendships shoulder to shoulder with other men.
Hmm.
And think about it. We have demolished male spaces for the last 50 years. So all of the places that men had to bond and connect and to find other males to be friends with have been taken out. The Lions Club, the Rotary, the barber shops, just all these male spaces, the
Yeah.
Title IX, where all these, I think it's 900 and some male sports teams have been dismantled. Well, that's where men find other men to be friends with, when you're doing something shoulder to shoulder with the
Yeah.
same goal. Now, sometimes when you're on the same team at work doing some goal directed
Hmm.
activity, that can also produce friendships. But women don't
Sure.
have that same limitation. The women's friendships can be born in lots of different ways, but the men generally tend to find male spaces where they're doing something shoulder to shoulder. Think about it. In wartime, men are shoulder to shoulder doing something dangerous. And the more dangerous it is, the more bonding happens.
Yeah.
Police departments, fire departments, military, all of these, of course, the military less so because there's more women in there now.
Yeah. Well, all of those spaces,
Exactly.
exactly, Tom.
Yes, thank you.
Nearly all of those once male spaces where male camaraderie and particularly masculine ways of relating were
Yes.
central to the organization in the last 50 years, and increasingly in the last 15 to 20 years, those have been broken up. And even, you're talking about just like a regular workplace. Of course, those were once far more
Masculine.
singularly or
Yep.
homogeneously
Yep.
masculine than they
Yep.
are now.
Yep.
And it isn't even just that women are present in these places, but that all of this legislation or quasi legislation, anti harassment policies, anti harassment discussion and workshops and everything, all of that has stigmatized the way men are unself-consciously with one another.
Yes.
Now they're told that it's wrong if they bond with men exclusively, and therefore, aren't mentoring women. They're hectored about the need to do that. Or they're told that if they joke together or get up to hijinks, that is in some way threatening of women, or makes the workplace less inclusive, or makes women feel unsafe. All those kinds of things. Every little bit of it chips away at the possibilities for men to spontaneously form friendships. And the
Yes.
the invasion of women into male clubs, and especially into the military and other, particularly masculine domains like policing and firefighting. I mean, it is just extraordinary that
It's
that's
amazing.
happened. And, and you're saying, well, women form friendships in various ways. But if all the opportunities that women had to be together unself-consciously and happily, if all of those were being broken up, and that there was
Uh-oh.
24/7 demonization of, women's coffee clubs, or when
Oh,
women get
God.
together to talk about their children or whatever it happens to be, if all of that was being pathologized, I think it would definitely affect feminine ways of being, and feminine friendships too. So it isn't at all surprising. And the fact that this article doesn't even think of speaking about that impact, I think says much more about how deeply, deeply even attempts to be pro male have been hijacked by the feminist project.
Yes, yes, indeed. And hijacked is the word too, Janice. I mean, if you look at the media in today's world, they're shaming men for not being friends, but at the
Yeah.
same time, they're giving men advice about just how they need to learn to be friends. And guess what
Yeah,
they tell them? They tell them they need to be more like women. I mean,
exactly.
here's
Yeah.
one magazine article I wrote or read said, "Why don't men have male friends?" Question mark. Because they don't emote, they compete, they have homophobia and toxic masculinity.
There it is. Yeah, I mean, it's so predictable, isn't it? And that's it. Before we were going to discuss this article, I put male friendship into, a Google search just to
Yeah,
see what
yeah,
else came up.
yeah.
And it's exactly as you say. It's
NPR.
all Yeah, it's all articles talking about what failures men are at
Yep.
being friends,
Yes.
how men's friendships are no good, they're not deep, they're not strong, according to these various experts, because men need to be more open with their emotions, they
Yep.
need to be more feminine, they need to get in touch with that side of them, or that men I don't know that men don't
Oh,
have friends,
of
and then
course.
they're a drag on their
Oh,
on their
oh yeah.
female
That's what
partners.
Harper's Bazaar said. Harper's Bazaar says men have no friends and women bear the burden.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean,
NPR says, men, if you want to have friends, you need to learn to be vulnerable and don't blame yourself, accept your desire for intimacy. Which translated to me says, be more like girls.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like the messaging is so contradictory and really so lethal
It's
to
crazy.
the genuine ways that men do form deep
Yeah.
relationships. And I think even Tom, I think we didn't look at the very last
Oh, we didn't, did
paragraph of
we?
the article, because
You're,
even the article, which again I don't want to dump on because it's a article that's raising this subject from a male positive point of view, but it ends, it gives with one hand and takes it away with the other hand. It says it's always been a precious thing. Well, that is wonderful. I think that's the most important sentence in the whole article,
there
that
you
says
go.
it's worth fighting for. Yes, the first and best way to do this is to teach young boys what it means to be a friend. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is a huge subject. I thought maybe there could be some discussion here about the very distinctive ways that men are friends to one another, the
Yes.
masculine ways that men reach out to
Yes.
one another and what they
Yes.
do together and all of
Yes.
that, what makes their friendships unique. Instead, we have sharing emotions and
Now, who
normal
does
physical
that?
affection. Yeah, there we have it. And the other thing is, well, okay, I agree that children need to be taught lots of things about how to be their best selves in the world. Well, who does the teaching? Who
Yes.
in our culture is teaching boys how to form friendships? It's not really as many men as we would like it to be. It's often women teaching boys to be feminine in their friendships.
And
Boys need to be mentored by men. They need to be introduced into ways of being masculine in the society of boys and men, and what that means, by
yes.
men, not by women who discourage them from doing the kinds of things they want to do, and give them a different sort of model for how to be friendly with others. And so that fact that isn't discussed in this article too is one of the reasons why I don't think, although it raises an important issue, I don't think it goes nearly far enough
Right.
in addressing
Right.
how we need to change to encourage male friendship.
Yes. And if you look at the indigenous cultures, they have some fascinating rituals to help boys move towards men. And this is one that always stuck with me where the mother asks the young boy, young man, to go get her some water from the well. So he brings the water back to her and he throws it in her face. And from that point on, he goes and he's with the men then exclusively
Yeah.
for like a year, I think, before he comes
Uh-huh.
back into the tribe as a man.
Right.
But it's that
Exactly.
action. And I'm telling you, I worked with mothers for over and over again, and they all describe this experience of feeling like the sun has thrown water in their face. They don't
Hmm.
say that. They don't talk about the water, but they feel like they've been insulted by him in some
Yeah.
way.
Hmm.
This is
Yeah.
boys trying to act this out. They're trying to move
Yeah.
away from the feminine space and get into a masculine
Yes.
space. And we've
Exactly.
given them nothing.
No.
Nothing.
There are no real rituals at all, or even very mild versions that allows the boy to reject and escape from the maternal
Yes,
and the feminine, and to
exactly.
move into masculine spaces. I mean, really, I think I mean, obviously, we need to reverse this trend of shutting down all male spaces. We need to make it possible for boys and men to gather. And the only place left, I guess, really in a way, is sports teams. But even sports teams now, I mean, sports is the latest frontier, really, in the attack, the
Yes.
feminist attack.
Yes.
Everything has to be focused on female issues. Sports teams have to be concerned about breast cancer or whatever. There are all sorts of charges being made against athletes that they've been, sexually harassing women or whatever it happens to be, and in all sorts of ways, feminist culture is even taking over the most masculine of sports, and that's a real shame.
Yep. Yep. It's absolutely insane. Because boys and girls, men and women have very different ways of friendship. And I've seen over the years that women talk a lot
Yeah,
in their
exactly.
friendships. They talk a lot. And that's not a bad thing, but it's a female thing, right? The guys will also talk in relationships. It's not like they don't talk. And sometimes they talk
Right.
about things that are really important to them. But they're more likely to sit together and going fishing. Two guys can be in a fishing boat and all day and not talk very much at all, but they go home feeling like they've had an experience of closeness. They feel
Hmm.
closer to that guy,
Yeah.
you know? And to me, this is a fairly mature way of being, where you sense the closeness without words. You kind of are just enjoying being together in the moment rather than
Hmm.
yakety 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 yak. So
Yeah.
I just see that as really a mature form of friendship that sometimes gets shamed because it's not talking enough. But I've seen
Exactly.
I've
Hmm.
seen men over and over again, when a man is in pain, another man will come up to him and put his hand on his shoulder, just like that. That means more to that man who's in pain than 1,000 words. You
Hmm.
know, it's like just
Yeah.
that act of knowing that guy's there for him. That's what he's saying with his hand. He's saying, "I'm here for you. I'm going to support you in this."
Yeah.
Which is huge for men, you know? But it's very different from the female way, because the female way is you talk and you
Yeah.
support through talking. And that's, it's not a bad thing, but it just is very different.
Hmm. Yeah, and and what we see in so much in our society now is the constant implication that male ways of communicating are inferior
Right.
and inadequate.
Yep.
And what a damning message that
It's
is. And
crazy.
then to create an article like the Harper's one about how men don't have any friends, and that's a drag on women who have to bear the burden. When often actually the reason that men don't have friends is because their girlfriends or wives don't approve of them.
Ooh,
They
good
don't
point.
like their friends. They don't like the time spent away from home. I mean, I was recently just reading something about marriages during the late 19th century. And one of the points that was brought up was that again, men and women had separate spheres, and even the closest marriages, the most successful ones, where it was clear from letters and everything else that the husband and wife really deeply loved one another and
Right.
enjoyed and felt that their union was precious, they still spent a lot of time apart. The man often spent a great deal of time either at his work or at his club or both. And the importance to the man of his male spaces was unquestioned during
Yes.
that period, where now often men are not even allowed to go and spend a night out with their friends, watching a hockey game or whatever it happens to be, because their girlfriend doesn't like the friends or doesn't like the fact that he has this space of his own.
Yes.
And so until we really confront that as an assault on male friendship and start shaming women who do it, I think
Yes.
this whole problem is only going to get worse.
Yes. I think so too. And I think there is some good news embedded in all of this. And that is, if you look at the MGTOW community, I think a lot of male friendships are being born there. you know.
Yeah.
And if you look at regarding men and my Patreon site, there's men meeting with men, only with men, and they get
Yeah.
close fast. Boom, they get close fast, and that's I think that's where we're headed. You know,
Yeah.
is tiny pockets of male friendship in different places where men can feel safe in being together as men.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think men are recognizing that
yes,
the way in which they've been forced out of their male spaces is negative, is damaging for them, and they're doing
yes,
something about it.
yes.
So,
And the
yeah,
more we can push that, the better, I think,
agreed.
because
Yeah,
it's critical. Oh, it's critical. Yeah.
yeah.
Are we good?
Yeah, yeah.
Is,
I'd be very interested to hear from people who watch this episode, from men, of course, what they think about male friendship and
yes,
how they form friendships,
yes.
and those factors that are crucial to strong male
Good
friendships.
idea. So put it in the comments below. Talk about your own perceptions of male friendship, how you do it, how you've seen others do it, or anything you want about male friendships. Put it in. Let's see what you got.
Hmm.
That's good. And of course, we know that men,
Are
good. It's hard to screw it up with two people.
it's good.
All right. We'll see you for the next one. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Janice.
Yeah, great to speak to you, Tom.
Men are
Bye bye.
good. We'll see you. Men are good, as are you.